So one more time, everybody, welcome to Shifting Gears and Changing Our Minds. Dr. Long and I will be working you through the next hour of a PowerPoint and some activities that you can do experientially with the youth, families, and adult clients that you are connecting with through telehealth. I'm asking everybody who is capable of it to, if you're logging on from a computer, find the chat function on the bottom of your screen, click on it, and put your email address into the chat so that I have a written record of who attended and I can send you out the handouts tonight or tomorrow for this presentation. But welcome, and I'm glad you're all with us.
So does that automatically go in?
Bobby, so I was about to say you have a participant who raised their hand, but they just put it down.
Okay. And Mari, that's you?
Yeah, it's me.
Oh, good, because I got you, I found you. You know, it's nice when you go over a certain number of people, they start alphabetizing them in the participants list. And so I could find you and make you a co-host, which was helpful.
Lucas, come here for a second. So she wants our email address, and I put it here, but it says type message here.
Well, once you hit enter, it'll just ask you for more messages. You don't have to do it repeatedly.
When did you do it?
I'm in after a quarter, so here.
So did you type in your email?
Yeah, I thought so.
What was it?
P.
Bobby, I accidentally muted you because I muted everyone so that we didn't have conflicting voices. So be sure
Good. I was actually looking to make sure that you weren't muted, so we're all good. And I think we're just about ready to go. 165. So let me say my little announcements one more time, and then I'll introduce you and we'll launch into it. Welcome everybody to Shifting Gears and Changing Our Minds, Adapting Behavioral Health and Mental Health Services during COVID-19. I appreciate y'all being here, and I want you to know that we are recording this so that we can get a version up on the IHBT website. And when I send you your handouts, I will send you a link or, to the website itself so that we'll be putting resources and webinars up there as we move forward during this event. If you are logging in by computer and haven't done it yet, please go ahead and hit the chat button on the bottom of your screen and add your email address. Make sure it's correct so that I can send you the handouts for this presentation today. If you're calling in by phone, then you should mute yourself with *6, and you unmute with *6 as well. So if you had a question or needed to talk to us at the end, you're welcome to do that. But mostly we would appreciate everybody staying muted, because even if you think you're quiet, we'll hear little typing or kids or pets or things like that. I think that's it. So if you need to email me, the email address will be at the end of the presentation, and you can send me your email address. Or you can take it down now, and it is bobbi.beale@case.edu. That's bobbi.beale@case.edu. And whether I get your email or whether you're in the chat, I will make sure that you get those handouts. Okay, so let's go ahead and shift gears and see what we have here. This will be approximately a 1-hour webinar experience, and I would appreciate any feedback that you have for us so that we can keep improving our services for you. I come from the Center for Innovative Practices at Case Western Reserve University, and I also do some adventure therapy work through Life Adventures for All. My co-presenter and colleague is Dr. Mari Lung, and she is an instructor at Prescott College and also a part of Life Adventures Counseling and Consulting. I consider her to be my personal expert in experiential interventions, and so I've invited her along to make sure that we can offer you some engaging ways to attend to your children, youth, families, and adults that you're having to serve through telehealth now. So here we are, COVID-19. I don't know about the rest of you, but I did not think that I would be using the word pandemic in daily conversation ever in my adult life. But here we are. The problem with COVID-19 is that it is causing everyone, and that includes the providers, the organizations, and the clients, additional trauma and chronic stress. Living in a pandemic is pretty much the definition of unrelenting stress. When we have that kind of trauma and chronic stress, it activates our stress response system and throws us into our survival skills. You probably know these, or some of these, as fight, flight, and freeze. So if these are our survival skills and they're designed to save us, what's wrong with that? Isn't that a good thing? Well, let's dig deeper and find out about those survival skills. First of all, your brain has survival skills on tap ready for you because they know that you need to escape your perceived threats or alleviate the pain or distress caused by that perceived inescapable threat. And so your survival skills will kick in automatically when you think there's a perceived threat out there. Unfortunately, survival skills or tools often look like aggression, impulsivity, and self-centeredness. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to say one of those three words was in almost every diagnostic assessment of the youth that I served for years and years and years. These are the exact kind of behaviors that they want treatment providers to get rid of or reduce or manage. Unfortunately, your brain does not want you to get rid of these tools because they are designed for survival. We need to shift how we're thinking about survival skills. They are ways that any reasonable person would act in order to escape a threat or alleviate pain. My personal soapbox in all of this is we must stop punishing trauma responses and survival skills. Because when the youth that we work with act aggressive, impulsive, or self-centered,
Let me hit the unmute button.
putting them on behavior plans to stop doing that. And not just behavior plans, but people punish the youth for doing these sorts of behaviors. So COVID-19 puts everyone on the crisis cycle.
Bobbi, are you wanting to share the screen at this point so we can see the PowerPoint?
Oh, you know, I thought I already was, but thank you, Mari. Let me jump over there and share. So let me back up just for a second so you could see what was going on. There was really only 2 slides. COVID-19 is causing us traumatic and chronic stress. It activates your stress response system, which is fight, flight, or freeze. Here's where we talked about the survival skills, and that the survival skills often look like the very things that people are referred for to treatment, and we have to be careful that we're not trying to eliminate things that help people survive, and we should stop punishing trauma responses and figure out better ways to handle that. COVID-19 puts everybody on the crisis cycle, not just our clients who are probably extra reactive because we know that the vast majority of our clients have adverse childhood experiences or prior trauma history, and it makes them overreactive, extra reactive, and they may struggle with skills to manage the reactivity. But the trick here is that we're all kind of on this crisis cycle because COVID-19 is an equal opportunity virus and we are all at risk. Now, there are definitely some people who are at more risk. We know from the information that's coming out from the CDC and from the state of Ohio that people who are older, people who have any kind of heart or lung condition, they are at increased risk for getting the disease and struggling through it. Once you're on the crisis cycle, however, it's important to understand that your goals get reduced. the treatment goals that you had set up for your families, youth, and adults prior to the beginning of March probably worked just fine for you. You were trying to help them on the skills and the activities and the things that were appropriate at the time. But now your treatment goals should be reduced to safety and survival. These are the things we have to check on first and repeatedly with the clients that we're seeing. And now, more than ever, we need to be trauma-informed. In order to be trauma-informed, let's revisit SAMHSA's 4 R's. The 4 R's of trauma-informed care are realize the widespread impact of trauma, and this is widespread. I'm pretty sure you realize that it is negatively impacting the entire world. And what are the pathways to recovery? And we're going to get into those. You need to recognize trauma signs and symptoms. And the top 3 are going to be fight, flight, and freeze. And my interpretation of those as aggression, impulsivity, and self-centeredness. But you'll get lots of other smaller behaviors that fit into these categories. And so we want to be able to recognize those. And then we need to respond by integrating all the knowledge we have about trauma and trauma treatment into all facets of both our service delivery and our lives in general. Because now everybody has a chance to say, I've got some trauma going on. Finally, we want to resist re-traumatizing people or adding to their trauma. And we can do that by decreasing unnecessary triggers and by not punishing the very survival skills that are being enacted in these people. So it's time for us to shift gears. Here is a short list of ways that we think are important to shift right now. First of all, realize that no one's going to be working on their old treatment goals right now, and that's okay. You should think really seriously about shifting to the second bullet point where everyone's goals are safety and survival. We need to put basic needs first, and I'm going to go through a little hierarchy of needs in just a moment here. But a couple of things I'd like you to be ready for. First of all, everyone should understand basic crisis management skills. Even if you were not working in that end of the field where you had to manage a lot of crisis, the chances are pretty good that you have to do some now. And this includes safety planning. If you have conflict in a household or in a couple or in a situation where people are sheltering together, then you should probably come up with a safety plan that includes some prevention and what to do if things got out of hand. You also want to utilize and encourage anxiety reduction strategies. Both for yourself, because I don't know about you, but I wake up most mornings and think, oh, we're still in a pandemic. Holy crap, what is going on? And lots of people are feeling this way. You get these feelings of being overwhelmed or being anxious or being depressed. And so we need to use some really basic skills and strategies like grounding and coping. And finally, I think that the goal here is to activate both provider and client resilience. We all have the innate ability to withstand things. We all have the innate ability to rise up and to do the right thing. But that needs to be facilitated and activated both in ourselves and with the clients that we work. At this point, I would like to shift over to Mari, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And she's going to, I hope I'm saying this correctly, but she's going to come up with some strategies for us to engage virtually with our clients, because now we are not supposed to be seeing them face to face.
So one of my favorite activities that we've been doing both at our community counseling center, and I work with interns who provide services, as well as my students who are in mental health counseling and helping them to engage in others as we're trying to do this in telehealth, is having this conversation about COVID-19 and how we have to shift our perspective. And there's a super easy activity that we can do online. I invite you to participate as well, because the more that we participate, the more that we get out of our experience. Super easy. All you have to do is take your index finger, point it at the ceiling. I love that I can see some people doing this. Put it and draw a clockwise circle on the ceiling. Whatever you think is clockwise is fine. And that clockwise circle in the ceiling, move it to about head high. Keep pointing at the ceiling. Move it to about waist high. You're still pointing at the ceiling. And look at your circle. Like, wait, it's going counterclockwise. I see some people trying that again. If you're drawing a clockwise circle on the ceiling and you're moving it down to about waist high, now you're looking at it, it should be going counterclockwise. The circle has not changed. The perspective on the circle has changed. You were looking at it from underneath before, and now you're looking at it on top. COVID-19 is just COVID-19, but our perspective, our experience on it can change. And so that's one of the pieces that we're doing as we're mitigating, you're using the therapy to mitigate some of the stress that's happening, is how can we shift our perspective? The next activity that I invite clients to have is just to take a piece of paper. You can do this one if you like to. You need something to write with. Typically, I invite our clients, we work with a lot of families and kids, but even with adults, I invite them to pull out a crayon. Most of us have crayons at home. It invites that little bit of playfulness. Play can provide some respite. One of the reasons why I think it's important for us to do experiential activities, even in this telehealth world, is so that we can connect in that playful way. We can give our brain a break. So when I say go, just draw a scribble on your page. Go, scribble, scribble, scribble. Should really look just like a scribble. Is it dark crayon? The green wasn't showing up. It just looks like a scribble. And then with that scribble, you invite your client to find something in the scribble. You might have to turn it upside down or turn it around, because oftentimes we have to look at things from a different perspective or a different outlook. You can add some different colors or just use the one color that you had picked. And then when they're done, they can share what they have. I also love that you don't need a lot of art skill to do this because you're already starting off with a scribble. So you notice that my scribble turned into kind of a duck or a swan. I'm not quite sure what people are seeing, people nodding their heads. And so it's another way that we can have this conversation about what seems like this really messy world. How can we make sense of that? It's a great activity, again, with kids of all ages, but it also works with adults and families. I've been doing a lot of family sessions online this past week, and doing an online family session can be challenging. So we did this activity with a squiggle, and everyone made a squiggle, and then they exchanged squiggles, and then they made the picture from the squiggle that they got from someone else. And what was fun about that version is that it was a co-created picture. We work with each other to try to make sense out of this messy situation. All right, Bobbi, I'm going to toss it back to you. That's 2 activities. I do want to remind people that we will include the activity instructions in the materials that we send out, as well as some of those talking points or discussion points that I threw out too.
Thank you, Mari. And back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so these are the building blocks of resiliency. These were put together years ago by a team working with the Center for Innovative Practices of adults, young adults, parents, and youth. And they looked at what is resiliency and what do we do about it and with it, etc. And this, we rearranged all of the different components of resiliency that they came up with and put it into a hierarchy. This may look familiar to you, because it aligns very nicely with Maslow's hierarchy of need. And usually we spend our time on relationships and connections and mastery of skills and competencies. That is a tremendous portion of the work that we do as counselors, social workers, psychologists, and helpers out there in the world. But right now I'm going to ask you to lower your gaze to the bottom of the screen and focus on basic needs and resources. When we're checking in with our families, we need to be saying, how's it going? What do you need? Everyone's worried about things. Clearly, everyone's worried about toilet paper, but I hope that's calming down a little bit. But I also hear people concerned about food. Are the grocery stores going to stay open? And am I going to have enough to feed my family? And so you need to check in with your folks on basic needs and what are their resources and where can they get them? And do you have any links or resources that you can help connect them with? But please hear this clearly. By checking in on basic needs, it doesn't obligate you to solve every issue or basic need for them. a lot of times what families need is validation to say, yep, everybody's worried about that right now. We're not quite sure what it's going to look like in a couple more weeks. Those sorts of things. So don't hesitate to check in with them on very basic needs. If you're like me, after years and years of working in an agency, and many of you do work inside child, family, and lifespan agencies, we kind of push basic needs and resources aside for case managers or CPSTs or people who did specifically that kind of linkage and resource work. But now I think it's up to all of us when we check in with people to check in on those basic needs. While we're doing that, we're going to hit challenges. I broke the next two slides into two sections. Internal challenges that can get in our way and external challenges as well will be the next slide. So let's buzz through these quickly. First of all, emotionally, the clients that we work with are going to be extra reactive. I've already mentioned that. But the combination of being extra reactive and having limited emotional regulation skills can be very challenging to us. And so you want to make sure that you give people a chance to react and then help them just sort of breathe into it and calm down and be working directly on those emotional regulation skills. Behaviorally, we're likely to see some poor impulse control. And remember, impulsivity is a survival skill. They do things quickly to try to take care of themselves, even if they're moving in the wrong direction. One of my biggest concerns for our populations at large is risk-taking. We still have people who think it's okay to go out into the world on a regular basis, and what's happening is when they come home, they're exposing everyone they live with to all of the toxins and potential virus germs out there, and when we go visit people in their houses, we're exposing them to everything that we're bringing in. This is why they immediately flipped the switch with telehealth and said, it's safer for everybody, the families, the individuals, and the workers, to do telehealth unless there's some sort of great emergency that requires an on-site or in-home presence. Cognitively, we're probably going to see maladaptive thinking patterns. This is not unusual for client base, but watch for those. And developmentally, not only will we have skill set deficits because of childhood trauma, but you can also come face to face with people with pretty direct and legitimate disabilities, developmental disabilities, physical health disabilities, emotional disabilities, those sorts of things. So be ready, they all get stirred up. Externally, the things we want to keep an eye out for are people. Are there challenging people in their lives? Is it negative peers? And when I say negative peers, I'm not just talking about kids. I'm talking about adults who are hanging out on their phones and on the internet and on the news and listening to all the different opinions about what's happening and what we should be doing about it. Some of the information is clear and supportive, and other information not so much. How about family conflict? Did you have a lot of family conflict in the home or in the family that you were working with? Because having to shelter together and alone without other ways to release that tension can increase family conflict. I'm on the lookout in case lists for places where there have been domestic violence, child abuse and neglect, and generalized family conflict, because they're going to need some help to keep things steady. The people that our families engage with, us, the providers, the helpers, we want to make sure that we're having very helpful responses, not unhelpful responses, and I'll spend a minute on that in a couple more slides. Places, usually I would identify that we need to focus on all the different domains that people go out into, but right now they should just pretty much be at home, and so what you're really looking for is how supportive and safe is their home environment. You may have people who feel stuck, makes them feel a little crazy. Maybe there's no privacy because there's a lot of people in a small apartment, those sorts of things. What things should we be looking out for? Well, the one biggie that I want to make sure I mention is there seems to be there's pervasive substance use. And in some ways it's being condoned. whether it's with funny memes about having drinks at 10 a.m. Or it's condoned just in their own house because they feel like it doesn't matter, we're stuck here, why not use right now? And so make sure you're asking those questions and addressing that and supporting people in their sobriety. And finally, the last quadrant is about safety, but of course the biggest issue is overriding everything else, and that's COVID-19. So let's go back to that crisis cycle. When we have people who are dysregulated, they're dysregulated because they've been triggered somehow. And like I said, I think every morning you could wake up and feel vaguely triggered, that things aren't quite right, because they're not. And what you're watching for is a low level or a moderate level of agitation with the people that you're connecting with virtually. And if you see that, you can assume that they are dysregulated and that they need some regulation to help them get through this. But the first thing I want to advise you to do is to validate them and say, this is a rough time. Lots of people are feeling like this. Eventually it's going to get better. You're going to be okay. I want to be able to help you. And you just want to keep validating that there's a good reason for them to feel agitated or dysregulated. Proximity is one of those interventions that's right underneath agitation. And usually I talk about getting close or being distant from people and whether that's increasing or decreasing their agitation. But now we don't have physical proximity, and we should be connecting with them virtually or by phone. And so what you want to watch for is offer them opportunities to connect with you as much as possible. So if possible, use a platform like Zoom or Doxy or Google Hangouts or whatever it is you're going to use, but give them the opportunity to see your smiling face, because that can be reassuring and calming. And as much as possible, you'd like to see them. It's part of our check-in now when we call our clients or get in contact with our clients. If you can see them, please do so. And so I encourage you. I hear about workers who, I don't like telehealth. I get it. It's not my favorite way to do treatment. However, it's what we have now. And so practice it. Do it more. Regulation activities. We want to offer them regulation activities, and to put it into a nutshell from Dr. Bruce Perry, they are rhythmic, repetitive movement activities. The fastest way to help calm somebody down and get them regulated again emotionally is to regulate them physically. So can they do some exercises? Can they do some jumping jacks? Could they put on a yoga app and do some stretching and releasing, those sorts of things? But if you've worked with your clients before on regulation, then you can remind them about those things. Otherwise, try, a lot of times in real life, in vivo, I would have you do regulation activities with them. Could you coach them through it on the phone or on a video? And finally, general support. Do you need a break? Do you need a drink of water? I can't give you a pat on the back right now because we're separated, but I could encourage you to get somebody who would hold your hand or pat you on the back in your house. As they get, if you can help them with that agitation, you bring them back down to that calm state. But if you can't, or you're talking to them and they're already more accelerated, you can try a few other things, like attunement. Attunement simply means mirroring your client. And so adopt their posture, their facial expression, their tone of voice, their volume, those sorts of things. Coping skills. I would assume if you're a therapist and you've been working with youth or adults for any length of time, you've probably worked on some coping skills. Now's the time to coach them right through them. Remember, if they get agitated enough, they no longer have access to their cortex, and we need to help them remember what it is that will help them calm down. And finally, flat out verbal directions. When people are feeling at loose ends and they're uncomfortable and don't know what to do next, a calm, directive voice can be something that pulls them back or pulls them through it. Now, if somebody peaks and has a meltdown or a blow up, your only issue is going to be safety. Who's with you? Who can help you? Is everybody else safe? What's going on? But this is really, during the peak is no time for a big clinical discussion. They can't really attend to deep conversations about it. You're going to have to wait for them to de-escalate a little bit. And it will naturally happen if you can just hang in there with them. Once they start de-escalating, you can cue them about how they're relaxing or slowing their breathing or releasing their tense muscles. You can praise them for getting through it or for it not being as bad as it could have been. And once again, fall back towards that support and supportive end of intervention. For those of you who work directly with youth and children and parents, this is a trauma-informed behavior management slide. Again, we'll share a PDF of all these slides with you so you can have it, but let me walk you through it real quickly before I turn it back over to Mari for some more activities. Number one, interrupt whatever the unacceptable behavior is quickly, calmly, and consistently. And folks, this isn't really for you, this is for you to teach the parents to do, okay? Have them interrupt the behaviors they don't like, and generally they don't like them because they're either not safe or not respectful. And say something like, I don't want you to do that, or I can't let you do that because it isn't safe or it isn't respectful. And we want to keep everybody safe during this time, including you. But don't stop there. Immediately coach them, coach the child to do exactly what you would prefer they were doing with very specific instructions. Do you want them to share? Do you want them to use an indoor voice? Do you want them to stop using something inappropriately? Tell them exactly what you want them to do instead. And finally, you have to turn away and let them decide to do it for themselves. And why might they decide to do the right thing for themselves? Because this is a punishment-free behavior management program. There's no punishment here as long as they try to move towards more appropriate behavior. And so it's sort of like a free pass. They get to do it over as often as necessary and move towards that appropriate behavior. This isn't magic. It takes time and repetition, and we need to reinforce any movement toward that appropriate behavior. I'll be happy to field questions about this, and you're welcome to email me about it, but we found that it's pretty successful, and it achieves that goal that I have, which is to stop punishing trauma and survival skill responses, and instead teach them what else they could do. Mari, I'm going to stop sharing and toss it back to you.
All right, so I'm going to take us back to one of your suggestions where it was regulating. We talk about regulating all the time, and how can we do some regulating activities while we're online? So one of my favorite go-to regulating activities, whether we're in person or online, is teaching people how to juggle. You can get a YouTube video and watch this YouTube video together, but it is also super easy to teach as well. You start off with one tossable object. I use koosh balls just because I have 3 5-year-olds and a 7-year-old, so we happen to have a lot of those around. But you can use rolled up socks or bandanas or a variety of tossable items. Actually, bandanas that are knotted up are probably one of the easiest ones to learn how to juggle because they move slower and they do not hurt when they hit you. Keeping that in mind, we start off with one hand and you toss it up a little bit above your head and catch it. And I have the client do that 10 times in a row successfully. So what happens? Sometimes they drop it. We talk about what do we do when we make a mistake? We pick up and try again. We want to practice something. Once they can do it in one hand, switch to the other hand, 10 times in the other hand. Once they do it 10 times in the other hand, then you switch back and forth, 10 times back and forth. You're not quite juggling yet, but almost. As soon as you have 2 balls that you're putting in your hand, you toss one up, and then when the one hits the peak at the top is when you toss the second one. So it's a beautiful pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Box breathing is also a 4 count. Lots of things are a 4 count. So as we get a little bit better and smoother, even just tossing that 1, 2, 3, 4 is enough to start regulating ourselves. By the way, once you're tossing 2 in that pattern, you are now juggling. You do not have to be tossing more than 2. If you're tossing in that pattern, you're using the juggling toss that you need to be able to toss more. When they're ready, add in a third, and that's just another pattern. Woohoo! So juggling, one of my favorite activities, and really you just have to be able to get to 2. One of my other activities that I enjoy when we're talking about practicing directions, making mistakes, being vulnerable. One of the pieces that I've run into with our telehealth is that people feel self-conscious online. It is really fascinating to me what activities I can offer in person and what they'll try to do versus all of a sudden they're on a TV screen, on a computer screen, and suddenly that self-consciousness comes up. So we want to practice that vulnerability as well as following directions and just sometimes the confusion that happens when we're trying to do more than one thing at a time. So we start off really simply. You have this invitation to join me. We're only going to count to 6 and move an arm. Super easy. Are you ready? Oh, I love that I got a thumbs up. Thanks. So with your right arm, put your right arm towards the ceiling. Count 1. Great. Down is 2. Up is 3. Down is 4. Up is 5. Down is 6. Go ahead and try that one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Excellent. Look at how easy that is. Okay, the other hand, so with your left hand, you're going to go up with 1, straight out to the side is 2, and down is 3, up at 4, straight out to the side is 5, down is 6. Now let's just try just your left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you're working with parents, this is a great activity. If they're trying to work at home and what I'm calling crisis schooling your kids, now all of a sudden they're at virtual schooling, you're trying to do 2 things at once, go ahead and try both of your arms at the same time. Are you ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Some people are like, I'm just going to flap my arms and hope that works. Super fine to do that. And I just learned something about my client. They were willing to try something even if they weren't perfect at it yet. That is a lot of what we have to do in our space of change. They're also willing to look a little bit silly, to be vulnerable, to practice that. Once you get good enough at that, it does become rhythmic and repetitive. Obviously, I didn't have to think about it very much as I was doing it, but I've been doing the activity since 1986, so it's been a long time. There's a thing called brain gym, and there's lots of other options just like that. As people are getting helpful at one, you can try a new one. And a lot of my kids, particularly that 7 to 9-year-old range, really love that brain gym. I find that it calms us down, but it also practices making mistakes and the learning process. All right, Bobbi, I'm tossing it back to you.
All right, thanks. Back to our PowerPoint. This slide is about all the components of resiliency. There are 12 different topics here on this resiliency consensus statement. Each one of these is a potential session for you or more. We, of course, start with basic needs, safety, and supports because that's where I'm suggesting you need to enter with all of your clients these days. But I want to point out a couple others. I won't spend time on every single one of them, but I will mention validation and valuing. Validating people for what's going on in the here and now is critically important right now. And to the right of that one, positive connections. You are part of the positive connections in this person's life. And so make sure that you are checking in with your clients probably more often than not. And you don't have to have super long sessions right now, but you need to have frequent check-ins and seeing how people are doing. I also want to drop down to contributions and participation. Everybody feels better when they feel that they're helping or contributing to other people or the greater good. Look around. There are ways to get our people involved in helper projects. People are sewing masks and people are doing games together online and cheering each other up. People are checking in, just in the same way I'm asking you to check in with your clients on a super regular basis. You could advise your clients to be checking in on all of their family members and whoever else, friends, church members, people that they're concerned about, and help them find a way to connect with other people, because connections are good, but also to feel like they're being helpers in the world, because that is a way for us to both increase our resiliency and to feel better. Speaking of feelings, drop down to the bottom right-hand side, sense of meaning and joy. It is difficult to pull a big sense of meaning out of this huge virus right now. However, there are instances where it's pulling groups and people together. We're giving up on some of our conflicts so that we can focus on all surviving this together. And every single day, we should be looking for a little joy. It's important to be able to find joy wherever we are. And that could be a task that you do online or on the phone with the people that you're working with. What brings them joy and how can they find it? Here in Ohio, it's right on the cusp of springtime, and it's not quite nice all the time yet. However, it's going to be that way pretty quickly here. And so perhaps you could practice looking for small pieces of spring and certainly moments of joy. There we go. So back to those helpful responses and supports that we have to offer people. Sometimes you have to know what doesn't work to find out what does work. So the next slide is about what are less helpful or unhelpful responses. We don't want to challenge people beyond their ability. We do not expect that every parent is going to be great at homeschooling their kids. But are they going through the motions? Are they trying the best that they can? That sort of thing. We want to make sure that we're supporting that. By the way, don't be overreactive to things that are going on and things that happen. This is not the time to draw hard lines and to hold people accountable for every tiny thing. This is the time to sort of just roll with things. Don't make or take things personally. Make sure you let go of things. You don't want to extend any negative interactions. You don't want them to feel your judgments. Don't try to convince people of your way of seeing things. Just offer them options. You don't have to convince them. And for sure, if you're working with kids, do not pile on negative consequences. They're already feeling trapped in their homes with their families, that sort of thing. And so try to keep consequences, negative consequences particularly, very limited. Watch your communication style. Make sure it's effective, not ineffective. Don't do what I'm doing and just talk, and don't give anybody else a chance to get a word in edgewise. And for sure, no use of force, fear, or threats. All of the things that I've identified in this unhelpful list of responses will simply serve to escalate the behavioral issue or increase the sense of anxiety. So if those are unhelpful, what is helpful here? Well, we want to be facilitative. We want to assist people and support them and accommodate them. The biggest way that you can do that from go is validation. You want to validate that you're there too, you're in this too, and provide and offer emotional support. You don't generally offer emotional support by making them pay attention to treatment objectives and just forcing them to go through the motions. One way you can offer emotional support is to have more check-in conversational time. One of my meetings yesterday, we got going on what jobs did you all hold when you were teenagers? And everyone, there are 8 or 9 of us at this meeting, shared just a minute or two about a funny or an interesting job that they had when they were younger. And it was a way that we could connect with each other and feel more normal socially. And then we could go on with the virtual or online work. So if you're having those sorts of supportive and social conversations, good for you, because that is part of treatment right now. It provides normalcy and emotional support. So be flexible, adapt to what's going on, try to make sense of behaviors that you see. Don't judge them or rate them or try to convince them that they're wrong. Just make sense of them. All the behaviors, as Maslow would say, all behavior is lawful, meaning all behavior has a purpose for that person. Have realistic and achievable expectations. Be as consistent and predictable as possible. And I'm going to talk more about that for inside these homes that we're working with. We need some more routines and structure. Clear, direct communication, and I think you need to do something I'll call chunking. And that is, do you have information you need for your person to get? Well, then put it in a little package like, remember these 3 things, or think about it this way, and make that a chunk of information that they can really keep in their mind without having it be overload. And finally, a way to do some of this is to externalize your messages. For instance, I'm going to externalize all the messages Mari and I are giving you here today by giving it to you in an email. So you have a written version of what's going on, and you don't have to frantically take notes if you like something that you're hearing, and you can have it for reference and to expand your thinking on any one of the topics. So one of the things I want you to think about, once you've checked in with them about basic needs and safety and whatever your current concerns are about your client or your family, is resiliency. How do we activate resiliency? How do we boost and facilitate their innate resiliency? And here are some components for a resilience plan. First of all, we make accommodations. We're using video and phone so that we can keep doing the services that keep them grounded and supported. We are the supportive connections, and Mari already introduced us to some regulating activities, and I agree, but any kind of rhythmic repetitive movement is a regulating activity. Encourage them to get free apps on exercise, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, all those sorts of things. Shouldn't cost a lot of money, and people should start making them a part of their routine. Safety and resources we talked about, and looking for opportunities to contribute and opportunities to continue building skills and assets for the folks that we're working with. Providers, we had to change our minds a little bit. We want to change our perceptions about cultural humility. Last month, I would have said cultural humility was understanding other people's cultures, being humble about it, curious, and figuring out how we can work within that culture. Now the cultural humility, in my opinion, is that we're all in this together. The culture that we're in is COVID-19. But stay hopeful and positive. It will pass. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but we will see the other side of this. Never give up on your clients, your youth, or your families. Try to have realistic expectation for them based on their abilities and current situations. Change our focus to adaptation and routines. Change our focus from higher level goals to basic needs and functioning. But continue to identify strengths, abilities, talents, and skills. We've already changed how we serve people. We're doing it through telehealth. We should be available to people 24/7. If you aren't personally available to them, then please make sure that that they have the appropriate contacts for emergencies, including the suicide, the National Suicide Hotline, the text for help line, and those sorts of things, whatever your county promotes and uses. We need to change how we support families. We need to validate and value them and assume that they're doing the best that they can. And I think, yeah, I'm going to toss it back to Mari one last time. Here we go.
So, last two activities. Another one of my favorites, again to do in the office, but I found that translates super well to telehealth, is Origami. Origami provides great activities for frustration tolerance. This is one of my favorite ones. If you want to play along, just take a piece of paper. And the first thing that you do is fold a triangle in your paper. You have your paper as a whole, fold a triangle. Yeah. And then you're going to fold over this little extra edge. Again, you have your whole paper, fold the triangle, you fold over this little extra edge. Open your triangle up so that edge is in there and fold it back to your triangle shape. Once you have your triangle shape, make the open side facing the top. Take one of the edges and fold it over to the other side. Again, you take one of the edges, fold to the other side. Do the same thing with the other side. We do the same thing with the other side. You'll notice that at the top, you still have a little bit of an opening. Fold one side down. So it kind of looks like this. Fold it down. Fold that other side down. Like that. Very carefully open the middle. Oh, you have your own little paper cup. There's a few activities that I've done with this paper cup the last couple of weeks. One, I've had people decorate on the outside of the cup what fills up their cup. I've had people put water in it. You can take a little drink, but we've also poured water in until it overflows, what's been overflowing your cup. In this past week, I've had people make their cups and they decorate them and they take little slips of paper. So I just cut little tiny pieces of paper, have them cut that. And every day when they've noticed something that's filling their cup up, they put it in their cup. And so this week they've been starting out the session by pulling out some of those ideas. And one of my clients had, his cup was not only filled once, he made 3 more cups. So we had 4 cups of ways that his cup had gotten filled this week. This was a kid where I had a hard time just getting him to do a rating scale on how he was doing. So it ended up shifting that focus, shifting that perspective, and documenting some of the ways that our cup gets filled up. As a therapy session, we've also had some good conversation about when does that get knocked out of your cup, or how do we fill other people's cup. So his challenge this week was to do things without being caught that might fill someone else's cup. So I can't wait to hear the feedback on that one. And then again with my clients, particularly my adolescents, but also my parents that I work with, or people that are taking care of kids, we're talking about how do we create more space. We're stuck in this little tiny space. So I tell them to take a piece of paper and cut a hole in this piece of paper. Because this is the space that we have right now. We're all staying in our homes, sheltering in space. You see, I just folded it in half and cut a hole in the piece of paper. Like, this is the space. This is how it feels right now. How restricting. Now that you have this hole in your piece of paper, try to get your whole body through it without ripping it. I almost always have to show people, and you can pretty much never do it. With the piece that was in the middle, like sometimes what we need to do is rethink how we're making space. We have the same piece of paper. Actually, we have slightly less piece of paper because I used the middle of that other paper. And you start by cutting along the edge. And you're just going to zigzag back and forth. So as we're doing this, I might have a conversation about what helps you to think of things in different ways. How do you learn new things? How might we be accessing our resources differently? One of my clients today was telling me about what he misses is like, well, he's in 6th grade. He's like, my whole life, every day, I get to talk to my friends during lunch. And now I'm supposed to talk to my mom while I eat lunch. And so we set up a Zoom call so that he could have lunch with his friends, this really normalizing thing. So using the resources that we have, how can we make more space in it? That very last cut that you do, just make sure that the first and last cut is on that fold. You slowly open apart. Don't cut that first one, but you cut the fold of all of them in between that, just along the fold line. I keep opening it and cutting along the fold line. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work to access our resources. We had to learn new technology, figure out how to mute ourselves on Zoom. Notice that we're always on the camera, so you have to hide your video if you're eating or going to the bathroom. Look at the space that I created with this same piece of paper and how easy it is for me to get through this. I did this in a family session the other day, and they were able to, because if you make tinier slits, the paper gets bigger. They were able to create there so all 5 of their family members could get through a single piece of paper. And what a great experience to talk about how we work together and strategizing with it, and how thinking through our resources in a different way, we might be able to create more space in our world. All right, Bobbi, I'm tossing it back to you.
All right, thanks, Murray. And here we are, last couple slides, and we'll be wrapping it up here. This slide is about activating resilience. When I looked at resilience literature and research a few years ago, for me it fell into 4 quadrants: safety and control, social connections, skills and competencies, and service and contribution. In each of these quadrants, I've given you some ideas about how to activate or increase or facilitate other people's resilience in those quadrants. I've added 2 red boxes to it, though, that are specific to COVID. Everything I read and all of the helpful resources that I'm able to gather say that one of the primary things that people need to feel a little normal in a very abnormal time is routines and schedules. So put that at the top of your list of things you should work with with families, youth, and adults, is to put more routine and schedule into what seems like a day that doesn't need to have any. But the more we add that, the more normal we'll feel. And on the other side, consider helping your clients by providing an internet service. I've heard that some libraries will loan hotspots out so that you can work with them. Phones, tablets, Chromebooks. Agencies are really thinking outside the box these days and trying to help their clients access the very needed resources. Uh-oh, I lost my little cursor. Here it is. And that takes me to my last slide, which is The Deepest Well. This is a book written by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who's a pediatrician. I want to say podiatrist, but that would be wrong. Out in California, and she wrote this book, and it's excellent. If you're a provider, you should consider getting it. It teaches you about the biology of toxic stress or trauma, and she says there are 6 core pieces that will address the biology of toxic stress, and they are sleep, exercise, nutrition, mindfulness, and by the way, mindfulness can be meditation, but it could be prayer, it could be journaling, it could be self-reflection, it could be coloring. Okay, so mindfulness habits, mental health, and healthy relationships, connecting yourself to people who are healthy. Folks, try to help our clients schedule these things into their daily routines, and you do it too. That's the end of our presentation. If you have questions or concerns, there's my email address, bobbi.beale@case.edu. I'm with the Center for Innovative Practice. Mari Lung and I both work with Life Adventures Counseling and Consulting. And feel free to reach out to me. You should see the handouts and anything else, supportive documents, the activities. Oh, and one more thing, I'm going to share with you an individualized resiliency plan, because I think it's a good way for us to focus our energies and to get our clients to be as resilient as possible. Thanks for joining us. I am not going to be able to field any questions at this time. Feel free to throw them in the chat or email them to me, because I have another webinar I have to jump over to in 2 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.